Hi, I'm Gabriel Carrillo from the EdTech Bites podcast, a part of the Education Podcast Network, just like the show you're listening to now. Shows on the network are individually owned, and opinions expressed may not reflect others. Find other interesting education podcasts at edupodcastnetwork.com.
Welcome to Fresh Air at 5, the podcast. I'm your host, Bryon Carpenter. Fresh Air at 5 is my regular attempt to exercise by walking about my neighborhood, to take in podcast content, then reflect in an unedited video, which I finally post to my Twitter channel. This podcast will be a regular collection of the audio from these selfie videos. You can follow me on Twitter at FreshAirAtFive or check out my website, BryonCarpenter.com, for other content I have created and collected. Hey, PLN, Monday, May 24th, 2021. It is Victoria Day here in Canada, which is one of the queens, and we are celebrating her birthday. And so that happened. She was born a long time ago, and she's not with us anymore. But it's still a holiday that we've got, and I'm thankful for the day off. And this past weekend, Friday was Pro D. Enjoyed learning about challenging behavior and what I can do about that, and expecting the unexpected with Regan Rankin. So that was fantastic at the My PETA Spring Conference. So that was there on the Saturday. We did some yard work in the yard back here, enjoyed our yard, and Sunday went for an 18-kilometer hike around the river out near Chilliwack, out that way, and enjoyed time with our family. Fantastic. This morning, I went for an 8.5 kilometer with my buddy, and we walked around another loop of the river and enjoyed the outdoors. I did not take my headphones with me. I didn't take my phone to do a recording. So this is my recording later in the day. And as I was working in my shop, working on a bird feeder for my wife for the back deck, I'd listened to EdTech Bites. No, not EdTech Bites. That's Gabe Carrillo and his podcast that he has is EdTech Bites. I listened to Gabe talk to Fonz on My EdTech Life on episode 67. So thank you, Gabe, for joining Fonz to talk about your passion, talk about what makes you excited and enthusiastic, and what bugs you about how teachers treat students. It's so important that we take care of our students, and we treat them with respect, and we treat them how we want to be treated and how we expect to be treated. And we need to do the exact same. Never, ever get in a battle with a student in a class. It doesn't work out very well. All behavior, as Regan Rankin said on Friday, was a form of communication. And what does that mean? And how do we get down to the bottom of it and figure out what the students are actually saying? We got to take time and build relationships. Thank you, Gabe. Thank you, Fonz, for My EdTech Life episode 67. Looking forward to talking to you guys later. Happy Monday. Hey, PLN, it's Tuesday, May 25th. 2021, and it is the beginning of my work week. Yesterday was a statutory holiday, and I enjoyed the day off. But to be honest, I got at it last night. Did some marking, thinking, and getting ready for what's going to happen today when I head to school. And looking forward to an after-school session as I get to talk to some teacher candidates from a local university here in our town that are aspiring to be teachers. So I really like talking to them because they're excited and enthusiastic about learning. So that's fantastic. And so this morning on my walk, I've started off my walk by listening to episode 86 of Got Tech, the podcast. And Geis and Nick talk about their summer learning for 2021 and how they're going to go about doing that. And without giving it all away, you have to check out this episode because, for starts, they shouted out my name because I was recently on a podcast with them, and we recorded came out a couple weeks ago as we debated Canva and Adobe Spark. But they provided me like I said last week when I was listening to another podcast, like my summer Pro D, things I can learn about the summer, things I can listen to, things I can read, and they have gone through the categories of people to follow. They've gone through podcasts to listen to, books to read, conferences to attend, and I am going to be presenting with Can You Learn at DLAC this summer. So Randy Labonte has invited me to join him at DLAC for some presentation about distributed and digital learning. So I'm looking forward to that. I'm going to attend ISTE Live. Last year I avoided it because I didn't have the capacity to do so, but I will jump in and take in ISTE Live this year, so I'm looking forward to that. And Eric and Nick, appreciate you guys. Thanks for sharing. Thank you for putting together your curated list today and giving it to us so that we can have some more things to think about. I mention you guys all the time. Tell my people about it, so hopefully get some more listeners. Have a great day. Bye. One more thing for May 25, 2021. I just listened to the first time because of a recommendation from Nick Johnson on Got Tech the podcast. I just listened to the 10-Minute Teacher podcast with Vicki Davis, episode 741. Vicki, that's a lot of podcasting. That's a lot of production that you do to get out the 10-Minute Teacher podcast every day. Thanks so much for doing so. I'm new to this podcasting thing, so I just marvel at that episode number because that means that there's been a lot of consistent work in preparing and thinking and sharing your ideas and having guests if you do that all the time. But yes, on episode 741, you had guest Sarah Parker Wolf, who is the author of Intentional Practices or something. Okay, I got it wrong. Intentional Practices for Teachers in the Classroom. Something like that. I apologize, Sarah, for getting it wrong. But the whole point is that we need to be intentional in our day. We need to be intentional as we move through as opposed to default. I like how you talk about driving to work and forgetting that you drove to work. Some days as I'm out here for Fresh Air at 5, I get home and forget that I went for my walk. I forget the process of walking, but I do be intentional by getting out the door and listening to podcasts so I can reflect on those. So thank you for challenging us to be intentional in our days and to take stock of intentionality. So important, so good. Have a fantastic day. Take a listen to the 10-Minute Teacher podcast. That's my new recommendation, one of them possibly for this week. Okay, bye. Another one more thing for May 25, 2021, as I'm rounding out my Fresh Air at 5 walk this morning. The theme, professional development. How do you learn? How are we intentional? How do we go about gaining knowledge as adult learners, not child learners? So we do professional development for a couple of reasons. One, so we can be better at our craft of educating and working with students. But say you're an adult educator that is working with adults. You know, what do you call that? I heard a term this morning from Ali Rodman, who was a guest on episode 113 of Easy Tech Tips podcast with Monica Burns, and Ali talked about adult learners and adult learning ideas about andragogy. Like pedagogy is how we work with kids and bring learning to life with them, and andragogy is how do we do that with adult learners. Something that I found curious in what Ali said is that, you know, we try to use the learning management systems and tools that we teach our kids so that they can, you know, we can use those to model them. There is a place for modeling, but there's also a place for using adult tools for adult learning. And some of those come out of the business practice, out of business applications, as opposed to educational applications that are designed for kids. So not everything translates from kid to adult to keep it engaging and mindful and connected. So that's really important. Thank you, Ali, for bringing these ideas. Take a listen to Monica Burns' Easy Tech Tips podcast, episode 113, and get your learning on. If you're a coach or professional development deliverer in your district or space, I would encourage you to take a listen to this episode as well. Thanks so much. Have a fantastic Tuesday. And with that, Carpenter out. Bye. Hey PLN, it's Wednesday, May 26, 2021, and today is middle of the week for us here in British Columbia in Canada. It's a short week because we had Victoria Day on Monday. Well, necessarily, by the end of yesterday, I was already tired from being back at school because it was a full day, an engaging day. I put the effort in. Oh, and then at the end of the day, I got the news that the BC Restart plan for getting us back to normal included opening up restaurants again, which is good, doing some other things that we can have people over to our home, like 5, at one time, and things like that, because the spread of the virus here is going down, which is good. But the one thing that I was looking forward to was the lifting of the travel restrictions. Back in the beginning of May, we were locked down into our health regions here and not able to travel beyond those borders. We could, but for non-essential travel like recreation, like fishing that I like, beyond Hope here where I live, where there's lake country and big rainbow trout, I've been locked down. So that was really crumb. All right, this morning I listened to the House of EdTech episode 179 with Chris Nesi. And Chris, thank you so much for bringing to us your thoughts about blended learning. And this guy here, he is a blended learning teacher. I work at a school that is an online and blended learning school, and it's really important that we engage our students in and out of school with content that is creative and engaging. The big thing about it is that it has to be engaging. And so I appreciate your thoughts. It resonated with me a whole lot as I was walking along here thinking about and hearing you. Did I hear anything new this morning? Not at all. So I support you, Chris. I think we need to be focused. And I even talked to a group of student teachers about this yesterday, that we need to hang on to those tools and things that we have used that were effective. Peace out. Have a great day. Bye. One more thing for May 26, 2021, I just listened to The Creative Classroom with John Spencer for the very first time. So this is my second new podcast this week that I've listened to on recommendation from Nick Johnson and Eric Geis from Gut Tech, the podcast. And so thank you, gentlemen, for your recommendation on your episode 86 that I listened to yesterday. And John Spencer, thank you for putting yourself out there and sharing your vulnerability about creativity and that it is a challenge sometimes. And so I like this episode that I just listened to about how creativity habits are like working out. And, I'm out here working out right now. I'm out here walking, and it takes effort to get out in the door every day. And but the consistency of doing so clears my head, helps me think. I learn new things and, sparks creativity because of the rest from the regular that this brings me. So, John Spencer, thank you for your 5 things about how working out and creativity are very much alike. You'll have to go listen to all those because I cannot recall all of them exactly right now, but rest is a big part of that. Having routines for creativity is important, and John talks about his routines for getting up every day and devoting an hour to quiet time or so, and then an hour towards creativity. And that is like, wow, that's incredible. I think about 2 hours a day that I would, give up. Well, look at me. I'm out here doing this for an hour every day, and I'm out getting some fresh air. And, John, it's about hiding the exercise in something else. If I wasn't listening to podcasts, my app, my motivation for walking would be way lower than it is. So that's important that we enjoy the outdoors so that we can clear our heads, and that helps increase the juices of creativity. Really awesome to think about. And, it was your video about what does it mean to be creative, that I now show in my Adobe Spark session that sparked me to think about myself as a creative more. Have a great day. Bye. Hey PLN, it's Thursday, May 27th, 2021, and I just wanted to share a podcast with you that I listened to. Actually, I listened to it live because I was on that podcast, and it was an interview that I had recently, actually last night, with Fonz Mendoza on My EdTech Life, and Fonz streamed live our interview conversation from StreamYard to various places, and it ended up on YouTube, and then it ended up in a podcast. So it's episode 68 of Fonz's podcast, My EdTech Life. So check it out. You can hear more of my story and things that you may not know about me, things that go on for me that are important, and what I'm passionate about. So yeah, take a look at that and take a listen to that. And it was curious to be with Fonz in StreamYard and to be recording our interview that was being streamed live. So it was like a little TV broadcast that he put on. He had the questions on the screen, side by side with him. People could see us on YouTube. My parents watched the interview last night. I gave them the link to the YouTube feed, and they sat and ate their dinner, and they watched, and they were like, whoa, we didn't know that about you, Bryon. So it was quite fun and enjoyable. Set up a green screen, had an external microphone, headphones on, and it was pretty fancy. And thanks, Fonz, for having us. Thanks for having all your guests that you have on your podcast, amplifying and sharing their stories about the work that they do, where they're doing it. All right, Fonz has another episode tonight of My EdTech Life, and he'll be streaming on YouTube, Twitch, and his Facebook pages, as well as on one other place, can't remember, but you can take a look at that as he talks about NFTs with Joshua Barbasoa, I believe his name is. All right, so take a look at that. Thanks. Bye. One more thing for May 27, 2021. I listened to Teachers on Fire Spark episode 194 as Tim brings us the 29 essential quotes from The War of Art. And it was fantastic, Tim. Like, this was a blog post that you just drafted and put out there. And so thank you for sharing that and challenging us to think about our creative work that we do and how we need to have a warrior and a professional mindset towards doing these things. It's important that we have this I'm not going to stop creating mindset. This opportunity that I've got right here to talk to people on Twitter and on my podcast is a creative work that I do, and I had to come to realize that I had something to offer. Last night when I was talking with Fonz Mendoza about my creative side and about getting my podcast going, and the fact that Chris Nessie and Tim didn't push me, they encouraged me, they urged me, nudged me, and saw that I had something to say, and they provided an opportunity for me to get to that and to share that with those out there. And I had to press record and I had to press send, and it was an important opportunity for sharing my creative self. Yes, we are creative beings. We have been made to create and to contribute to the world and to society. And if we sit back and let procrastination win, then we have lost this battle. Doesn't mean we've lost the war, but we've lost the battle. Are you winning the war? Are you a creative person? What have you created today? So thanks, Tim, for your thoughts. It's challenging, and I'm going to go back and listen to this again and again, because there's a lot of quotes in there that are various. Talk about resistance, talk about procrastination, and talk about doing and doing and doing. Peace. Talk to you guys soon. Bye. One more thing for May 27th, 2021. Have you ever wondered how much power there is coming out of the sun And like, how bright is that light bulb? Well, on Tim Stevenson's, that's Astro Stevenson, his podcast Science 360, this past week, he lays out for us a science lesson with many divergent smaller lessons built within it for context. The way that students in your classroom, actually you got to go outside for this because the sun is outside, not inside, is to calculate how much energy is coming out of the sun using simple lab equipment. I'm not going to spoil it. The answer's in here. You could go look it up on Google, but it's more fun to do science and figure out these things for yourself and then compare them with what people think, because it's amazing that we can do so much science and math and figure things out with our brains because we've got smart brains. We just have to know how to organize the information. And Tim does a great job of doing so in this episode of Science 360. If you're a science teacher and you need some content and some just different ways of presenting some information, check out Science 360. Highly recommend it. Subscribe because Tim puts out fab content and he's a fellow Canadian educator just down the road from me here in British Columbia. Thanks, Tim. Fantastic. And I have yet to crack open your book, Beyond the Classroom. Things are a bit busy right now, but summer's coming, so I'll do that soon. Appreciate it. Talk to you. Bye. And one last thing for May 27th, 2021. This week's theme is about professional development and how we grow professionally. Well, I can tell you that I have had some professional development in the past few days, listening to podcasts, working with Fonz Mendoza on my EdTech life, and recording a podcast last night, and having the experience that whatever we do can be professional development. My grasp and an understanding of how we can share simple truths with our students through science experiments was expanded a little bit more this morning, thanks to Astro Stevenson. So, professional development is the theme this week, and it wasn't much of a stretch to be able to say that we can do this with anything that we listen to. It doesn't have to be organized professional development, but if you are growing as an educator as a result of what you're hearing and listening, and even if you're listening to this podcast, you're going somewhere else to learn something, fabulous. Have a great day, and that's it for today. Okay, bye. Later on the same day of May 27th, 2021, how's your day? Happy afternoon to you. Well, I was out delivering papers with my daughter, getting some more footsteps in and walking, and I listened to Che and Pav on the Staff Room Podcast, episode 87, as they talked about Google Drawings and mosaic art portraits. So fantastic. Caught my eye. That's like a Google tool, and I like the Google tools. You guys know that. So that's one of the things that I use in my classroom as actually an activity that I have my students do to create mosaic art, not right from scratch, but from, a template, some from a drawing or an image that we find on the internet, and then they make a copy of said drawing in their Google Drawings. No, not a copy. They take that image into Google Drawings. Then they use the polyline tool that one of your students discovered, which I'm fantastic to hear that they discovered this. And then they mosaic like crazy for a long time and come up with some fantastic things. I'm going to send you guys a link in the show notes of the podcast and also this tweet. And Shane Pav, you can expect to get that. And this is an article that I wrote for a newsletter a little while ago, actually a couple of years ago, that is, helps get started with mosaic art in Google Drawings. Yes, Google Drawings has its limits, but it's also quite fantastic for some of the things that it can do. My students use Google Drawings to create logos and icons for like logos and PNG files that they can use for in other documents to tell stories and to identify themselves with things. So yes, it's fantastic. I like it a lot, and glad to hear that you had some experience with with it, and there are ways to improve it. What I really liked to hear was how your students were making a calendar. Is that like a flip calendar out of like tabloid paper that you print, and they have a calendar on the bottom with their pictures on the top? Ooh, can I get that lesson plan from you, Pav and Shay, so that I can try that with my students? Trade ya. All right. Happy day. Talk to you guys later. Bye-bye. Hey, PL, and it's Friday, May 28th, 2021, and I'm out here for Fresh Air at 5 this morning. It's the end of a week, and I am glad. Not going to lie, it's been a long week, even though it's been a short week. And for all my American friends, you have a long weekend coming up. But I see that most of you, many of you, are done school already. So that's fantastic. But the rest of us, maybe around the world, we're still going. I'm going until the end of June, and we've got about 4 more weeks to go of learning with our students. All right, this morning as I'm out, I found another new podcast. So this is the 3rd new podcast this week that I've listened to, and this one is the Ignite EdTech podcast with Craig Kemp. And Craig Kemp is the host and brings an audio experience, brings a fast talking and full-forced experience about EdTech and about thinking about education. So thank you, Craig, for what you've brought, and it's exciting to listen to you. I typically listen to podcasts at 1.5 times, but for yours, can't do it because it's already 1.5 times the podcast for the amount of time that you put into it. All right, so you asked a question about what does design thinking mean to you? For myself, I teach media design and doing graphic arts work with my students, and I talk about design thinking and integrating that now into the work that I do. So it's part of my curriculum, but it's more than that. It's a way of thinking about solving problems. I do the same thing in my own personal walk and life, and it all starts with empathy. I'm a scientist, and a scientist wasn't trained to think empathetically about the science that we're doing. We get right at what the problem is without asking the why it matters. So that was my training that I had as a scientist, and so empathy drills down into that. You had a couple guests on this episode 51 of the Ignite EdTech podcast. You had Saba Quidwi and Fee Morrison, and both of them brought a lot of conversation about their integration of technology. Gotta go. Bye. One more thing for May 27, 2021, following up on the conversation that I was listening to with Craig Kemp as he brought us episode 51 of the Ignite EdTech podcast. He had 2 guests, Fee Morrison and Saba Quidwe, and they are both engaged in bringing STEM and bringing technology integration to those around them. So thank you, ladies, for sharing your thoughts with Craig. You are tagged in this tweet so that you can follow along. And yes, I appreciate learning. This is one of my first international podcasts that I listened to, and so it was great to hear your different accents, because you know what? I got a funny accent regardless what I think about it, right? Okay. All right. Fantastic. This guy here coming from Canada, appreciate the international connection that I now have. We'll look forward to next week's episode, Craig. Happy week. Bye-bye. One more thing for May 28th, 2021, wrapping up Fresh Air at 5 for episode 22. This is the final segment for episode 22 of my podcast that'll be coming out next Friday night at midnight. I was listening to episode 202 of the STEM Everyday Podcast with Chris Woods. And Chris, thanks for bringing content. Thanks for doing it for 202 episodes. And it's fantastic to be able to connect with you and listen to you. And like a friend of mine said, we've never met in person, but the fact that he listens to my voice every day and on a regular basis, it seems like we know each other. And Chris, I feel like I know you. So I'd like to chat face to face and have a cup of coffee sometime and talk about STEM and education, but not for a bit. until we can travel again. Okay. As you were talking on episode 202, you were talking with Kayla Norville out of North Carolina, who is a STEM coordinator in her district. Dr. Kayla, congratulations on your PhD. And yes, we need to remember our titles because we've earned and worked really hard for those. So, yes, Kayla, you are a STEM coordinator and you're bringing STEM into cross-curricular. I like how you had the integration of, the different types of energy into an argumentative work that students were doing in English language arts. I think that's fantastic. We're looking at pyramid structures and how pyramids are built, as social studies teachers are talking about ancient Egypt. The cross-curricular is key. It's important. I'm not super good at it. I'm working on getting better at that with my teachers in my building, but it's something that really makes things stick and makes connections for students that otherwise a worksheet like Chris, you said, wouldn't do. All right, fantastic, everybody. Have a great rest of your Friday, and we will talk to you on the flip side of the weekend. Bye-bye. This is the wrap-up segment for episode 22 of Fresh Air at 5, the podcast that will be dropping next Friday. This week's theme for me that I picked out of some of the podcasts that I listened to, and then I was encouraged to, continue on talking about this week as I was writing an article for a newsletter and so on, is how is podcast listening professional development? And Astro Stevenson, he said that, we need to remember that podcast learning is actually really important. Not his direct words, but he tweeted that to me. And so I thank you, Tim, for being supportive. And we are podcasters, and we do this so that others can be encouraged and engaged in their learning, and how and where we can do that. Myself, I'm out walking. I get podcast professional development every day. I'm intentional about it. I could listen to music, but my life would not be more enriched by listening to music for me. If that enriches your life, I'm good for that, and that's good. But as far as professional development and growing, it's important that we put good content into our minds and be thinking about things that are challenging to us. And one way we can do that, put our headphones on and walk around with our mobile devices. All right, that's it for this week. I hope you have a great weekend, and thank you for listening to Fresh Air at 5, the podcast. Tell somebody about it. Okay, bye-bye.
As my one word for 2021 is appreciate, I appreciate you giving me a listen as I've created this podcast experience for you. It's a unique Blinkist or Coles Notes version of the content I take in, like a highlight reel, so that you can hopefully find other interesting podcasts you may not have considered before. I've recorded the specific podcast episodes in the show notes for your learning convenience. Please subscribe so you don't miss any of my upcoming episodes. And if you enjoy this podcast and its format, share it with someone else. Tweet about your experience or give it a review on Apple Podcast or wherever you listen to podcasts. Fresh Air at 5 can also be found on Voice Ed Radio. Your voice is right here, and on the Education Podcast Network, podcasts for educators, podcasts by educators. I hope you have a fantastic day and get some fresh air before the day is out, and take care of yourself because you're worth it.